Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me for where I'm from, number 42 with Melissa. She'll be here momentarily. What are you reading? I'm reading The Baddest Girl on the Planet by Heather Freeze. I'm going to choose that's how we say her last name. She's my guest next week. So that's exciting. I thought I had a minute. Look. So that's what I'm reading. I hope you enjoy what you're reading. Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
You did it.
I'm so excited I learned how to work the internet. Very proud of myself.
I feel like that's a byproduct of this whole experience is teaching people how to use Instagram Live. So,
Yeah,
because it seems that the same people like me now use Instagram Live over and over again. So,
100%. I actually went on Instagram Live once and I did it by accident and I got
oh yeah.
text messages and everyone's like, "You're Instagram living?" I'm like, I'm not clear how to turn that off. Shut it off.
I thought you meant you
I think I just,
accidentally joined one because I've done
no,
that
like I
all the
actually
time.
started to just
Oh, really?
broadcast my life, which I find horrifying.
As long as you weren't on the toilet,
Yeah, no, oh, no, no,
because
no, thank you.
lots of times people might use their phones there. And so that, could happen. So,
Is the world not germy enough? And
yeah, it is.
it's the world not germy enough.
It is
Okay.
very germy. So how are you? Or do you want to say anything before you start, or what do you want to do?
I'm good. I mean, this is your show, so I think
Show.
whatever you want. I think this whole exercise is completely fascinating. I have been writing and rewriting this poem. I'm up to about 20 some odd versions of it. I think it's almost like a life exercise, right? Like we
Yeah.
should write it again in a
Mm-hmm.
year, and you should write it
Mm-hmm.
again on milestone birthdays. And so I think that's sort of the most fun and also the most tricky part. It's also a really great reminder of how not great I am about following rules and templates. Probably more of a
I don't know
me
if it's
thing
really
than something else.
intended to be used that. I mean,
Yeah.
because many people ask me like, "Oh, I'm going to break the rules. Is that okay?" I'm like,
No,
"Of course." I mean, and most people do break the rules.
sure.
I think, especially if they're not like 14.
I think it's
Like, I think they'll
also,
follow the rules. 14
for
year
sure,
olds.
for sure. I think also how you perceive things in your life relative to what your feelings are, because
Mm-hmm. For
that was
sure.
the exercise first, because to get everything down, the objects that have, amazing or interesting memory for you are so, so critical and so interesting. But, a template's never going to ask your feelings. And so that's a conversation you really need to have with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I thought the whole thing was really fascinating. And, there's a portion where they sort of ask you what your, religious questions are, or,
Yeah.
lots of other things. And I don't have a relationship with religion at all. I
Yeah.
really don't. I almost have an anti-relationship with it
Mm-hmm.
just based on my upbringing. And so there's a lot of things about that. And I don't know, is this like how we should all meet each other in the future and just be like, I don't know, like
I know,
I'm
wouldn't
sort
that
of
be cool?
interested in like what your politics are and what your Where I'm From poem is. Those
Well,
are
they're
cool.
probably related.
Yeah,
Could be potentially related.
I think they are.
Um, I love it. Obviously, I do this every week, but I just because those are the kind of it's really hard to sort of ask these questions and get into these places with people without it feeling like creepy. Like
Yeah,
tell me,
but doesn't
you know.
this give you a framework? Have you
Hmm.
found it
Hmm.
easier as you
Hmm.
go to kind of formulate the questions? Because then there's some sort of guardrail about what you're asking, and that it provides a
Hmm.
little bit of context and layer of commonality, which I think is kind
Hmm.
of gorgeous. And,
I like it because in this format, at least, someone is coming, they get to make a choice. They've made it a informed choice. They've had time to think about it.
yeah,
They're not just like randomly sharing something with you and then going, "Oh,
right.
I can't believe I just said
Oh,
that,"
I
which
said that
happens to
out
me
loud.
all the time. That people say things to me and then go, "I don't know why I told you that." And so I like it because it gives everybody a framework, and I'm not worried that I'm crossing any boundaries or it's very like laid out. Everyone's doing what they're comfortable with, and sometimes it's interesting when I know people pretty well. I'm not sure what they're gonna share.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what pieces of themselves they're going to feel comfortable sharing in this venue. So for me, that's all been really interesting. So yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
That would be cool if people could just share their poems, speed dating style.
Yeah, I mean, it forces your edit a little bit too, right? I mean, for
Yeah.
me, I mean, family is a huge just sort of thread throughout my entire life, not only where I come from, but the sort of environment and the world that I have built for myself right now. And, trying to fit all of these stories that kind of ladder up to who I am, to me, I had more trouble picking out things to talk about. And because I had so many human stories that contributed to who I am, I mean, I had 4 grandparents until I was a sophomore in high school, which I realized is incredibly rare and very odd. And I'm very, very fortunate in that way. But that very much contributes to who I am. And I also come from a really giant family.
Yeah.
So the quantity of humans far more in a lot of ways informs a lot of how I grew up and the decisions I make and the values that I hold far more than any house that I lived in, right? The house was important, but I mean, I have very core memories that are sitting in my grandmother's backyard or, my uncle's front lawn. Like that was a place I hung out a lot. And so I think choosing not only which version you want to present of yourself, because I think if you start to talk about that, then that it almost makes it sound like you're fronting a little bit, but trying to make the most honest accounting without watering it down, I thought was the most exciting part of the challenge.
That's really well put. And I think you do, reading your poem, I think you do sort of nod to all the people in a way.
I hope.
That is rule breaking. So, you want to start?
Yeah. It's hit it and quit, I think they say. I also printed this out on an old school piece of paper, which I think is important to point out.
I think sometimes I can tell people are like, they really want to do this thing on a computer. I'm like, you can't, you got to do it on your phone because they want to, which I get.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good for you for printing it out
and privileging the
your
Instagram
comfort.
Live, right?
Yeah.
That's the... Okay. I am from books, from Italian ice, brown low-pile carpet, and a big stack of records. I am from the downstairs room where I keep a bucket of toys, including an old cast from my arm, smelly and covered in faded second-grade signatures. I am from the warm, never-bending rule of family first, and original performances created with a dozen cousins. I am from freshly cut bluegrass mowed in the summer. Its tidy stripes brought my sweaty father pride. I am from an R2-D2 action figure and a sticker from my grandma that says ERA now. From DeenPatriceMarthaAmyNancyJennifer and DanielMichaelJosephVincenzoChristopher. I'm from wear something appropriate, not that, that's not appropriate, and do the right thing. Think of how lucky you are. I am from light the menorah and put it up there so you don't set the Christmas tree on fire. Take a picture. You have to take a picture you don't want to forget. I'm from tomato sauce and chicken cutlets. From a desk in a freezer in the meat packing district where my grandfather worked the phones. I'm from my mother standing in front of a board of education facing reprimand for wearing pants. Cutting perfect circles in pasta dough with a juice glass. I am from the moments cooked in kitchens, documented in photos, stored in boxes, labeled with pens, kept in wallets, reminding us you don't want to forget. Applause appreciated.
Yay! You did it.
I did it.
Yeah, I loved it. And I thought the names, where you list the names, gave me a sense of the largeness. That's not the good word for it, but of your family.
Scale. Scale is good too.
That's a better word.
Scale is good.
Dozens of cousins. And I mean, it really, so were you Catholic and Jewish? Because I get Italian and Jewish. So
yeah. So my father is an Italian Catholic. My mom's a Russian Jew. And together they made us.
Yes.
they have their own story, which I really wrestled whether or not to incorporate that. It sort of, informs a lot of who I am too, because they weren't going to get married. And then they just sort of said, F it. And they did. And thank goodness. And not just because I'm alive, but because, construct is so, religion is construct, right? That's not a knock on anyone that chooses to have it as part of their life. But, to say that the rule is more important than your heart, I think is something that you really just sort of need to have a solid discussion with yourself, right? And they did, and thank goodness. And that's hard in 1970. Yeah, that's hard in 1971. That's difficult. Yeah, to say, like, when my grandfather looks at my mother and says, like, if you marry that man, like, I will sit Shiva for you. Like, that's a big deal. And then it turned out my father was like their favorite child, but my mom was the oldest of 6 girls, and you always say them in order, which is sort of why I said that. That's one word in my family. DeenPatriceMarthaAmyNancyJennifer is just one word. And on my father's side, I've always joked that it's sort of like a word bank, that exercise you have when you're a little kid, and you say, like, here's 4 to 6 base root things. Make as many words as you can. That's like the name game on the Italian side of my family. So, like, I don't know if perhaps there's other cultures, but it's a pretty Italian thing to understand that, like, Daniel, Danny, little Danny, yes, big Dan, like, those are all separate people. Yes. they're all different ages, and it's a big scale. But anyway, all of it is to say, I think that's why religion was never part of my family, is because family was my religion. And sort of being together and that value was so ingrained into me. And you have to understand that when you have that opportunity, your family can be your fortress. Sometimes that's probably another discussion for another time, if that's good or bad. But I did not grow up with a lot from a material or financial point of view, but that's how lucky we are comes from. In my family, it's like, you can always give back, because when you go to bed at night knowing that you love another person, or that someone loves you, like, that's has no value that you could place on it at all. That's the most important thing you have. So
yeah, I agree. But I understand too, I'm not saying anything about your family. I'm saying in general, like, if that situation is not fully functional or positive, then that, especially to a child, it's really difficult to unpack that, because everything is called love. Yes, regardless of what it is.
100% agree. And it's also not necessarily very empowering. Right. Which I think is a whole other conversation, because when you say, well, you've got your family, why else would you want to do anything different? And, what you really should be teaching is, this will all be here when you get back. Right. It's okay, Dorothy, go around, because it will be, your backyard will be here when you get back, metaphorically, physically, or whatever that is. Like, that's okay too. Right. Like, you can use that. It's one thing to have it be a fortress, but, like, put a gate on it, or whatever that metaphor might be. Probably dwell on that one a little more. I don't know.
That's the next poem. And when you return to it, there's something about a gate.
That's the next one. I'm fascinated. What age do you think people focus on?
Oh yeah, I've always I mean to ask that question, and then I don't always ask the same questions. But it seems like a lot of people choose an age. Some people are like 8 or I was very much like 12. I kind of like picked, because I moved when I was 14 away from my family. My parents divorced, although they divorced when I was 3, but they lived together until I was 14. Wow. Yeah. So I really wanted to focus on that. And I think a lot of people have events that sort of change the shape of their childhood. I should ask about that. And that, wanting to talk about before it changed, or, what age were you, did you feel like?
I don't know if I had a pin in a specific year. I think my range was sort of like 10 and below, or maybe 11 and below, something in that realm, like child-ish. We moved just across town, but we moved when I was in high school. And so that to me is sort of almost like a second portion. It would be fascinating to rewrite this as a teenager, from a teenage point of view, because not just because your worldview is changing and your concept of what's surrounding you is changing,
Mm-hmm.
but like your notion of things that are surrounding you is extraordinarily different. Like it would be far more music based and far more
Oh, yeah.
arts based, because that's where I began to really understand like those things were feeding me. They weren't just like kid hobbies. Those were things that
Right.
were actually turning into the fabric of my spirit. And you know, how you start to talk about stuff that's near you that has different value. Like I love my R2D2 action figure. I don't think I had it when I was 16 years old, which is a shame, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
Or even like when
I
you're in
don't
your
think
20s,
anybody
right? Like when you're in
does
your
that.
20s,
Yeah, for sure.
how you think about, you know, like, do you have a pot in your kitchen that you really love? And
Mm.
which was important to me. Like I had my first
Mm.
kind of big girl pot in my kitchen that I cooked from.
Yeah.
Cooking so important to me. And, you know,
Mm.
I just think it's fascinating. Do you have any like little kid poems? Like little?
No, I think most people, it's about 8 to 11, 12.
Mm,
I think that's kind of because much younger, I think people don't remember. There's not a lot of agency. And I think it's like you're kind of living in that space between when you don't have a lot of agency or memories and you then become a teen and your whole way of reflection is changing. And there's a lot more sort of cynicism, maybe, or
yeah,
judgment that comes
sure.
with that sort of when you start to really separate from your family of origin. Um,
Amazing.
so that's how they feel to me. And mostly when I ask people, it sort of lives in that space. And I think to me, it's interesting. And I have said out loud, but have not done it. Like I would be interested in trying to do it at different ages and trying to tap into what I was feeling in that age. But I think young would be an interesting challenge because it is very much like talking about family. You just kind of take things as they are. You accept
Yes.
what people say to you as being true. And I don't think there's the same amount of dissonance that then comes later. I mean, there was a lot for me, but um, I couldn't really understand it. You know, it was, as I said, my parents got divorced, but lived together. So I was already like a kid. People were like, what? You know, they really always wanted to know. And that was something in my poem that I didn't quite know how to talk about, but people always wanted to know the sleeping arrangements. That was really important to them. Like if your parents are divorced and still live in the same house, like, well, who's sleeping where and with who? And
Hmm.
they would always ask me that. And I would be like 5. And that's really inappropriate. Heads up, if anyone wants to ask a
It's
5-year-old who their
I,
parents are sleeping with, don't.
I'd like to add that's inappropriate now at your age. Like not when you're five. Like that's it's still
But people
inappropriate.
always want to know. And you know how people are with kids. They say things they would never say to a grown up, you know? And so that was a perfect, and me just kind of like, well, they sleep here. And I mean, uh, so there, I think it would be a fun exercise, a good exercise. I'll put it on my list of things to
I'm
do.
I'm still stuck on like people would ask you that, but I suppose
Oh yeah.
nothing should really surprise me
And it
anymore.
was so like, I mean, it was late 70s. People were, I grew up in Newport Beach, California. It's a very affluent, very yacht club kind of place. And so we were weird. You know, we were definitely the people who were strange. So people were already really interested in what was going on with us. And yeah, they wanted to
Newsflash,
know.
most of y'all don't know how your parents are sleeping now. Like you don't need to be bothering with everyone else.
But that's how it is, right? I mean, as a person who's in Al-Anon or 12-step recovery, you know, they always talk about keeping your side of the street clean. And so many people are very interested in the other side of the street. And that is something that I struggled with too. You know, I didn't want to deal with my own stuff. So I was very interested in everyone else's. And so I have compassion about that. But when I was
Yeah.
a little girl, I was just like, please stop asking me questions that I don't really understand or, know how to answer or and also I think when you're young, I don't know if you dealt with this at all, but I was definitely very old for my age.
Yeah.
That was a thing that I got a lot, and it's not necessarily a good thing.
Agree.
So,
Agree.
but
Yeah.
it was definitely always said that way.
Yes. Yes. As though you had
A choice.
a choice, or as though you had accomplished something other than trying to find your way in the world and being exactly who you are.
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I think I also still question, let's have a conversation about this over a glass of wine. I question if that comment is given even half as much
It's
to,
not. I know where you're going with this, and
boys.
it's not.
Or what you know what I mean? Or a kid that
Yeah.
identifies as a boy.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
with a girl, it's like, oh, you're so bossy and precocious and you're old for your age. And it's like, or they're just smart and you're enjoying their company. Like that's cool too.
That too, and also they'll take care of you emotionally. And that's something that we're taught to do from a really young age.
Yep.
And that's not the same. And
Yes.
and I don't think that they should be. I think girls should be less taught that way. I mean, I don't want boys to start getting, it's like with the body obsessed culture that we have. I kept hoping girls would move towards where men were, you know, but it said we're going the other way.
Yes.
You know, and I'm like,
yes, that's so true. Or like, you know, when you teach that as an accomplishment in some way, shape, or form, you almost, in a secondhand way, you devalue asking for help, or
for
like
sure.
naming a feeling that you're not sure what to do with because you're old for your age, and that means you're grown up and that you're all set now. Because like when you're a kid, it's like you were grown up or you were not grown up, and those are the choices. And so if you're told that you're grown up, and then all of a sudden you have just a difference, or you feel different, or you're just not sure because that's normal. You know, we're not taught to say that out loud, or this is interesting, I feel kind of different today. So
yeah. I mean, so much was just not happening when we were, so many things have changed. There just weren't so many words back then.
Yes.
There weren't as many tools. It was just a different, and your parents getting married, like, I feel like, but I could be wrong, but I feel like I had a decent amount of friends who had a Jewish parent and a Christian parent or a Catholic parent. And I feel like we were sort of the first generation of that was happening with some regularity, you know, and now it wouldn't be as big of a deal.
No,
but back then it was a big deal. Like especially in the community I grew up in, those were the people, who were like of interest or different, was people who just were in marriages that weren't, where two people were married who looked and came from the exact same backgrounds.
Yes.
Like those were the people. It was like, oh, there's a story there, you know?
Right.
And all the friends I had who celebrated both holidays, Hanukkah and Christmas, and there was no complicated conversations about what that might have been like for their parents to navigate. It was just like, oh, cool, you get both.
Yeah.
As a kid, you know, it's like, oh, wow, you get lots of presents.
Consistent comment that there was just this image from friends or whatever, and they would go, just pictured like that there was probably some room in the house where you opened it up and there would just be boxes stacked high, and which is a whole other conversation about how people perceive Hanukkah, that it's somehow like the Christmas equivalent, just because it on a
nobody knew what Hanukkah was. I mean,
near each other, like it's just ridiculous. But it's also like I don't know. It's kind of weird to sort of belong to two things, but not actually feel connected to either. Yeah. And you know,
which I feel like was pretty common with the people. Yeah. Like, I mean, I don't know how they celebrated Hanukkah other than getting presents. Like it was definitely. It wasn't until I was much older that I really knew what Hanukkah was. Yeah, it's, you know, I mean, that was not the conversation. It was, I get a present every day of Hanukkah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for me, it was a way of getting in touch with family and cousins, because,
for sure,
you know, my mom is the oldest of 6. I had a ton of cousins, and so that was sort of a way to. It was a time that you just, if you hadn't been in touch for a while, you make a phone call, you write a letter, you write a card, something like that. So I have a little bit of that association. I mean, sort of objectively speaking, Hanukkah's pretty metal when you think about it. It's actually pretty punk and cool, and like actually a whole holiday that revolves around like oil and fried cheese, and like, and it's pretty rock and roll. Yeah. But it's not like this major holiday.
No, right? And I didn't know that.
Not at all.
I didn't, as a person from a Christian background, like it was definitely the first Jewish holiday I had an awareness of.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think most people from a Christian background would, because of the Christmas proximity.
Yeah. Exactly. And honestly, I love Christmas so much because I cook a lot, and I was brought up cooking with grandparents. Like that's just what I did. I was just sort of like, you need to help. Like, you help in a big family. And so I have a lot of memory and a lot of core memory of like cooking and that time of year. And because we put such a high value on family, it was like, I sort of have this unbelievably lofty association with Christmas that involves no television and listening to music on vinyl and sitting there and not even praying. My grandparents weren't like, there was no like grace or anything, but my grandfather just every year going, look what we have. Like we can make food and have food together and sit as a family, and people don't have that. And so I think that's why like I never understood like that we were really poor, or that you know, we didn't have a lot financially, because like you're rich, right? And it sounds very hallmarky, but it's true. It really was a value that I was brought up with.
Well, I mean, that's really beautiful. And I'm into that Christmas as well.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, because that's what it's about always for me,
yeah,
is the gifts that we have that are not physical, you know.
yeah,
So and I think those are sort of the moments with a big family that I think so many people who don't have big families imagine. Grew up with a big family. They imagine that that's how it is, and I think it's beautiful that you had that. And I had glimmers of that too. But people don't know all the other stuff that goes on.
No, there's
and don't assume that if you have like 5 children, that's baked in. You know, like that's something you have to work really hard at.
Incredibly
And I think you have to make it a priority.
Yes.
And like you say in your poem, it's your first priority. Like it is the thing. And then there are other things that you don't do.
Yeah.
But you get this.
And then I think there's other things too about, you know, how does that shape you as you sort of become your own adult, and how do you view that, and how do you share that? And I think, you know, it's easy to establish how beautiful and wonderful and what a gift that is. But I think you also start to need to identify with like what a schism it may cause, like the year that you don't go to Christmas because you have a partner and you are going to their house. Or in my case, I had moved to Los Angeles, and my family was thousands and thousands of miles away, and I was about to get married like a few days later, and it just made zero sense for me to, you know, with my soon-to-be husband, with my stepdaughter, like schlep all the way to the East Coast for like what would be a 36-hour stint, come back to Los Angeles, pack it. It was just ridiculous. And I mean, it was in my 40s, and I chose to call my dad and say, I can't make Christmas work. I can't do it, you know? And that was a terrifying call. I mean, my aunt had to like say, she goes, you can't do this. This is ridiculous. You can't do it. Just, you're not going. I'm like, what do you mean I'm not going? She goes, you're not doing it. You're going to call your dad. You're going to do it. And my dad is by no means like a scary dude. Right. He's not like my house. Like, it's just like it, you know, when ritual becomes habit and where that line gets crossed, it's like, okay, I'm not doing the same thing that I have done 41 years prior to this. And that's, you know, you have to work on that for yourself too. Like, that's okay. You're not breaking your family when that happens.
You're definitely not breaking your family. But and sometimes those things that have such strong, I mean, like you say, when ritual becomes habit, that is a place where, you know, like assumptions are made.
Yes.
And it no longer becomes an invitation that you say yes or no to. It's an assumption that you will. And correct. That's when things get really dicey.
That's major. Yeah.
You know, So good for you, especially right before your wedding. That sounds really stressful. Anything else you'd like to say? We're coming up on a half hour. And,
no, I don't think so. Just thank you so much for inviting me. And, you know, I love
I'm so glad
so much.
I'm so glad you joined me. I always feel special, the people that I ask and like, come on, you do it. And I feel special, like,
yay. You're the right kind of nudge, as they say in Italy. Like, You're the right kind of nudge. You're like, if
Oh,
you're
good.
not going to be bad, I'm like, no, I
No.
think I'm going to be bad. You're like, I'm not going to be bad. So I'm glad
No,
you did it.
you're definitely not going to be bad. You were not bad. I really enjoyed your poem, and I knew we would have a good conversation. And it's as much about that as the poem itself. So I was unconcerned, rightly so.
Appreciate
So I'm glad you joined me. And yes, we will meet in real life and have a conversation.
I'd love it so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank you. It was really lovely. Okay. Bye, Melissa.
Thank you.
Bye.